Poinsettia, Chapter 7. Angus was on all fours, closing his eyes tight as Gavin stood over him with a riding crop. "What were you thinking, you miserable cur?" "Please, don't let me cross with me, master," Angus pleaded. "I did as you asked. I delivered the poinsettias." "But you put a hole in the wall." "Please forgive me." Gavin sighed, stepping back and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "What am I ever going to do with you, Angus?" He peered down at the pathetic sight. "Oh, for heaven's sake, get up! I suppose I cannot be too cross. You came and admitted it, so we can fix it quickly. But I never did authorize you to speak to Lord McCairn. And put some undergarments on. The last thing I want to see is that thing flashing at me. I needn't need to go blind, nor have an eye poked out. Master, does such vulgar things escape your mouth?" He plopped backwards to sit and peer up at the vampire like a loyal dog. "I just wanted to make things a wee more pleasant for those children, master. If you want Yuletide miracles, it may be best to start working on them early to avoid the Christmas rush." "Well, I can certainly see both sides of this argument. If the hospital can barely afford to care for the charges, how can they possibly care for an animal? Even if it was just one big dog or something, it would be nice. And you know dogs, they're very protective of their packs." Gavin stared down at him. Angus wasn't quite sure if his words were reaching the vampire or not. He finally sighed. "Such a dog. You are such trouble." He turned away, passing an oval mirror in the hall, but casting no reflection within it. "If you feel they need that sort of protection, Angus, then do so. You have too much free time as of late. Aside from your other duties and obligations, if you feel you must wander the grounds, then be my guest." He paused, sensing a dimming of mood, and turned to see Angus staring at the floor, looking rather depressed. He came closer once again. "Angus?" "Master, why can't we help them?" "Who?" "The children. The patients. You know as well as I do the medicine. As advanced as it is compared to 70 years ago, it still isn't enough to save many of those lives. It makes my stomach turn to think that those children are just waiting for death to come and take them away. How many do you think will have to hear their own banshees come for them, to announce the reserve ride to the Summerlands?" Gavin saddened suddenly. "Angus, don't you think if I was capable of doing such a thing, I would have already?" "Have you, master?" Gavin stepped back, catching himself on the wall. "Boy, that carpet sure was interesting all of a sudden." He turned and walked away, deciding to just ignore the question altogether. Yes, if he pretended it was never asked, then it wasn't. That was the joy of being lord of the manor. Angus wouldn't accept that, however, and got up, chasing after Gavin, racing like a dog into the library where he found Gavin sitting in one of the large, overstuffed leather chairs. "Master, why didn't you answer me?" "Let it drop, Angus. You had done something like that before, haven't you?" Gavin sighed. "Don't worry about it." "Tell me! Damn you, Angus! Why can't you just leave well enough alone? Why do you have to hide from your past?" he demanded in return. "For years you kept secrets from me, and up until now, didn't bother me. After all, now everything is my business. I can live with being a wee bit ignorant, but I'm tired of living beside you, serving so faithfully, and never been trusted with anything that be bothering you. Now either you tell me what you're hiding from me, Gavin, or I leave here tonight and take the matter into my own hands. I'll be the salvation for those dying children." "If you value your life, Angus, you will do no such thing," Gavin snarled. He gripped onto the arm of the chair before letting out a defeated sigh. "Very well. Sit. You want to know about it? Then fine. Finally, you're seeing it my way." Gavin wiped his face with his hand, calming himself. He then rubbed his chin. Then he brushed the hair from his face. Angus watched him intently. The werewolf was a stubborn fellow. He had McIntyre blood in him. Gavin could sense it clearer now than ever. "Many decades ago, I thought just like you. I had just returned from studying 4 years at a university in London. It had to be, I don't know, sometime in the mid to late 1700s. It was quite pleasing to return to McIntyre Castle at last. There is, after all, no place like home. Master, whenever you finish stalling. Gavin grimaced with both impatience and perhaps a twinge of a tantrum. There was no hospital here at the time. One had to ride 23 miles to Glasgow. My return was welcomed by a correspondence from there. A vampire wanted me to meet him there. Aaron Gales was his name. I never heard of him, Angus admitted. He wasn't exactly a famous vampire. Not like the one in that new Fancy Pants Bram Stoker's bestseller novel. This was a real vampire, but a simple fellow. I met up with Aaron in Glasgow. While being his guest, he would invite me every night to wait outside the hospital until lights out, when the patients were left to sleep. At that time, we would enter into the building and see a very sick child. I honestly do not know what her real name was. Aaron called her Onwin. After the gates of the underworld? Angus asked. He was a Welshman? Something like that. There were many children who were sick in that place. Onwin, we thought, would get better. They had been trying out some experimental medicines on her, and she seemed to be taking a turn for the better. She had some color, regained an appetite. Even her hair was looking healthier. But alas, it didn't last. She soon plummeted into severe illness. The medicines no longer had any effect, and it became clear that she would be dead in a matter of days. Her seizures were intense, and there were nights when, until we came to that realization, Aaron would have to hold her, or tip her forward so she would not choke on her tongue, saliva, or the foam. I was just like you then. I couldn't stand to see children suffer with such illness. I couldn't stand the thought that some god or demon took great delight in bringing such pain to such beautiful, innocent creatures. But unlike you, I didn't have a voice of reason to protect me. In fact, Aaron was just as naive as I was. We decided that we would be saviors. We would give those dying children a new chance at life. If human medicine could not cure them of their suffering, perhaps vampires could. We planned it very carefully, and we made our nightly visit to the hospital, and Onwin was the first. He took her in his arms, and he gave her a vampire's kiss. He turned her. From there, we went from room to room, turning every child into young fledgling vampires. Aside from being rather bloated from the deed, several vomits later to make room for more lives to be saved, there was only one room left. 2 little boys were all that were left of the hospital's sick and dying children. So we each took one, and began yet again to feed on them and turn them. But it was about that time an orderly had come in and caught us. We pulled away too soon, and those boys bled to death in our arms. But the tragedy did not end there. The bodies of the children began to rise, and they began to hunger, to thirst. We had failed to take into account having to control and tend to fledgling vampires on their first feed. Unable to do this, they fed on the adult patients, turning them into ghouls. It was complete chaos, and it wasn't long before a mob had assembled with the clergy. There were no survivors to save, so they decided it would be easier to kill all the vampires within the building by burning it down. We were able to find a window to escape, but Aaron refused to leave without Onwin. I escaped, but he never made it out, and neither did any of those other patients or their victims. I was partially responsible for killing the town's sick children, even those that had a chance to get well again. And I was partially responsible for those children feeding on the patients who were and were not capable of getting better. The lives in those hospital rooms. I take the blame for killing them all because of naive good intentions. He glanced at Angus, who looked rather upset. Turn those children into werewolf pups, and you'll end up with burdens just as heavy, if not more. I've already lost one of my best friends, and watched countless people die needlessly. Don't let naivety and angry townsfolk take you from me too. Angus gasped wide-eyed. He'd never heard Gavin express such concern for him. He knew they were distant relatives. He knew that clansman blood was there. He was the servant of the master of the house. but he never thought that he truly was Gavin's friend. However, it was obvious he truly did matter to the vampire. Gavin, you're the only family I have left who could possibly understand me, let alone tolerate me, Gavin said softly and sadly. Angus got up, coming over to Gavin and crawling into his lap, straddling the vampire's legs and embracing the beautiful head, lowering his own to rest atop it. Gavin, I'm sorry. But what are we going to do? Sister Bernadette said the finances were dwindling, when the budgets are cutting back more and more. If we didn't do something, there will be no St. Raphael's to speak of. Who knows what could happen to that castle and those children then? I'm sure the treasurer will figure something out. I didn't like him. He's a real jackass. Gavin peered up at Angus, who peered down at him. He reached up to the youthful face and brought it to him, to lean down, placing a kiss upon his lips. I do not believe he is capable, Gavin, Angus sighed. In 3 years, the finances have all gone to hell. Ironically, it came about when he did. That just seems like a really significant red flag. I didn't believe the hospital has gotten that careless. Let's not rush to any conclusions, Gavin replied. Let's take our time. Being gung-ho never really got anywhere neatly. You know what I think, Angus said. He's overcompensating. Oh, how vulgar, Gavin sighed, giving Angus a gentle push. Angus sat back and knelt between Gavin's legs, resting his head on his abdomen. No, Gavin, I mean, think about it. He's one of the meanest board members, the youngest, and he has a shameful relative. It must not be very fitting to the ego to be known as the son of the man who regularly beds with boys. That kind of thing leaves scars on the bloodlines. Re-establishing family honor is pretty tough. I would not be surprised if... If what? If he's a mean bastard of a man because his father used to touch him and the other boys? Perhaps. There's nothing we can do about such a thing. That was the past, and he is well in his 40s now. I can't just fire him because he's a jerk. And it's really none of my business what happened to him as a child, nor do I care. And you shouldn't either. Maybe nothing happened to him at all. Maybe he's jealous about that. Who knows? And who cares? Why is it bothering you so much? Is it what he said? He's a jerk, Angus stated. I don't think he cares a bit about the people he's supposed to be taking care of. It's an insult to me, to you, to those children, and to Caradwyn. Caradwyn, Gavin whispered. He grit his teeth, growling a little, his fangs tingling. He placed a hand on Angus's head, stroked the soft black hair. I cannot tolerate that, now can I? Go then, Angus. Be sure to make a statement. I seem to have been too absent from my own board. It may be wise to regain that control and tighten it. Those senile old fools and pompous whippersnappers need to be reminded just who the lord of the land is. Aye, my lord, Angus replied with a devilish grin as he sat back on his legs with a miniature bow.